Good evening, everyone. We are continuing on our book of Proverbs in chapter 9. And if you recall very briefly, yesterday when we were looking at chapter 8, there was a section uh, that describes how God used wisdom and amassed wisdom, and how wisdom was God's instrument to the formation of the land and the skies, right? The Hashmaim and the Haaretz. And the whole idea there is to describe the importance of wisdom, and thereby to be like wisdom, to adopt wisdom, and to have the wisdom. And I mentioned to you that the idea of wisdom and the knowledge as well as understanding, they're all interchangeable and they are all feminine Hebrew words. Hence, the writer, or Solomon, who writes these chapters in the book of Proverbs, use the poetic expression of a woman to describe how the son, right, or my sons, and my son in singular and my sons in plural, to be able to relate to this woman called Chokhmah, or wisdom. And hence that's a good thing. And behind wisdom, I have also suggested that refers to God's instructions or directions that was given for man to live and for the Israelites to live by, namely, in short, called the Torah. And so that in itself gives us a feel of how wisdom is so important. And now in chapter 9, as we begin, it says, wisdom has built her house. This whole aspect is another facet of how wisdom is used in the creation story. And wisdom, again, I described to you, and this is Chokhmah, and it is feminine. It's a feminine word, and hence it is personified again in a woman. And it says that Chokhmah, or wisdom, has established her house. And now the focus in the discussion in chapter 9 is about houses. Houses, a place called home. And so house would mean a tent. House would mean a home, right? A dwelling, a place where people live together, and I guess you could say that this is where the family is intact, right? So it talks about the house, and she has hewn. Well, understand the word hewn. Hewn is a verb that says cut up, right? Cut up. And the word cut up is like cutting up the trees. So in the old days, when you build a grand palace, like David building the palace, he used cedar wood from Lebanon. And the cedar wood is in great, huge pillars. And so this is what it means, that the grandeur of the house is using 7 pillars. And so these are big pillars, right? 7 of them. Now, if this relates to the creation story again in chapter 8, we would think that this might signify the 7 days. And if you have done your study in the book of Genesis, the 7 days are quite literal, and the 7 days are 7 days of important lessons to teach man how to live. Now, if you had not done your study in the book of Genesis, I will encourage you to study the book of Genesis and look at the 7 days as 7 specific periods of 7 instructions and how God clearly showed his wisdom in making and filling the land and the skies. And so this probably refers to that 7 pillars, and 7 being a very interesting number in Hebrew that reflects the number of God. And not only that she has built the house or established a house with 7 strong pillars, which may equate to the 7 days of creation. The discussion now is that she, wisdom, this woman, and we would call her the good woman in this case, right? The good woman has slaughtered her meat, mixed her wine, and furnished her table. This is in preparation for a celebration, right? And the idea of slaughtering, it is about getting food on the table, mixing the wine, and this would be wine ready to drink, which means that strong wine is mixed with water that it can be drunk, right? She has also furnished her table. The word furnished is to lay out. Now, if you recall, I guess if you recall Psalm chapter 23, right? Psalm chapter 23rd Psalm in verse 5. It says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." And that is what it means by prepare, lay out. And in Psalm chapter 23, it would be like a kingly feast. And so this is a preparation of a celebration, and very similar to the concept of Psalm 23. When one walks with God, when one knows God as his shepherd, or one who is shepherding him, then wisdom is the reflection of that relationship. She has sent out her maidens. Now, maidens here would be the female servants. She cries out from the highest places of the city, and we saw this in chapter 8, right? This is in chapter 8. And what is important is these words: cries out, sent out maidens. All of these are to fetch people for the feast, right? This is a feast. Now, understand the Hebrew feast as is being described here. There is a couple of things, right? One is the food. 2 is the drinks. And make sure that you realize it is not Coca-Cola. These are real wine, right? It is not grape juice. Furnish the table is a layout. And why is laying out important? Because laying out describes how important the feast is and for who is being invited. And so she goes and calls out the people in the street. And that in itself tells us that wisdom takes good care of the people who comes to her. So you can see this as an imagery, that wisdom, and behind it, the word of God, and behind it, God himself as the way of God, is to take care of his people. And in this case, a more poetic way of describing how important wisdom is. Now look at verse 4, when she cries out. Now understand this, crying out is like in chapter 8, right? Loudly. This is not whisper. This is not seduction. That is in contrast to the seductress with smooth words, right? When we read in Proverbs Chapter 8 as well. And so this whole idea is that wisdom is openly presenting herself. There is no fear in Chokhmah, in wisdom, to show herself. There is nothing mysterious. There is nothing clandestine, right? There is nothing seductive. It is open arms, inviting for a feast, which generally everyone would celebrate and enjoy. And with this idea of food, drinks, and layout, you can actually imagine this is very similar to Oriental culture, right? When we were doing the book of Ecclesiastes. Eat and drink and be happy. And so eat and drink and be happy is part of wisdom. And she calls out whoever, and this is anyone, and then this word simple. You would know that this word simple is actually in the singular masculine. This would be a naive boy, right? Any naive boy, let him turn in here. Now, naive would mean that someone who is not very discerning, right? Not discerning. He means that there's somebody who has lack of knowledge. Well, in today's terms, not street smart. And so I put it in quotes because it's not talking about secular knowledge. It's talking about knowledge of God and His Word. And so this is a boy who is not well versed with God's Word, which seems to imply, refer to people who are like that. And so as for him who lacks understanding, she says to him. And so wisdom is trying to attract people who are simple-minded, who are naive, who lacks understanding. Now, the word lacks understanding actually means this. He is in want, in need, right? In need, void of it. And one who is void, and this word understanding is actually the word heart. And so this is about the mind. But for some reason, the translators did not use the word heart, but instantly inserted the word understanding. Now, obviously, you are beginning to see that why does the translator sometimes use heart? And now they use the word understanding. Now, I've always bracketed the word mind every time the word heart is used, because heart is not used in our Greco-Roman context. It's like, no, it's my heart belongs to you. They don't actually express that kind of a sentiment that way. So in Hebrew, the organ called the heart is really the center of the decision-making process. The mind in itself, very alert and logical, but it is about this young man who is in need of clarity of the mind. And so you can remember that understanding of the mind has to do with wisdom. And so it is wisdom calling out to him, because he is lacking wisdom. And so God is always calling out to people who needs wisdom, and wisdom comes from the Torah, from instructions of God, and from there develops the fear of God to know how to live and make decisions in life. And so that's the invitation of wisdom. Come, And the word come here means walk. Walk. Walk to me and eat of my bread. The idea here is an idea of consume. All right. Lacham, my bread, right? And so this idea here is lacham, my lechem. Same consonants, right? So this is lechem. And this is, let me just put another color. This is lacham. And so I'm just trying to show some of the Hebrew poetry here. It says, come, walk to me. Lacham, my lechem. And of course, the English is translated, eat of my bread. So we don't see the poetic structure, but basically, this is an open invitation to the feast. And drink of the wine I have mixed. This is with reference to this right here. You can see that. Wisdom prepares the table with food on the table, and that would be also called bread, right? Food is bread and meat is bread. Wine to drink. And so that would be the feast, the celebration in a table laid out for these people who lacks wisdom. And the call is this. The call is clearly, if you come to wisdom's house, which is built on 7 pillars, you must forsake foolishness and live, and go in the way of understanding. And so there is a terms and condition. Verse 6, the word forsake is adsav, which means you must leave behind. The word forsake comes from the word, my God, why have you forsaken me? In the book of Psalms, right? And it's quoted in the Gospels. And so this is the same word. You must leave behind foolishness. What is foolishness? Actually, the idea here is not foolishness. You must leave behind the naive mindset. All right? And live and be alive. Because if you go to wisdom, this woman called wisdom, you will have life. But you must shake away your naive mindset. You are now naive, so you must leave naive behind. Because when you go to wisdom, you must embrace her like your sister. Right? That's how in chapter 7 goes. And thereby it says, and then walk in the way of understanding. Now this word walk, it means to walk straight. Right? Walk straight. You must make progress and advance in the way of understanding. The way of understanding means of discernment. And remember, discernment is also a synonym of wisdom. So if you come to the house of wisdom, you see the imagery? If you come to the house of wisdom, you must want wisdom. It's not about eat and drink and be merry. Because when you know wisdom, you will leave. You have to leave that lack of knowledge behind. You must build your knowledge of God's word. You must build your insight of life, discernment of life. You need to know and tell the difference between good and evil. And you keep walking that journey. Now that is the picture up to verse 6. Now, all these in verse 7 onwards, you will see that these are all little proverb quips, right? And the proverb quips is given by Miss Wisdom herself, which is written by Solomon, and it's derived from his wisdom of life, and of which he has been following the words of God, passed down from generation to generation, from David to Solomon. And that thereby is the law of God, the Torah. He who corrects a scoffer gets shame for himself. He who rebukes a wicked only harms himself. Understand, immediately you can see an A and a B. Two statements, speaks of the same thing slightly differently, but it is an emphasis. Now let's break this down. In verse 7, if you correct, the word correct here is to admonish. If you scold a scoffer, right? A scoffer is somebody who speaks a lot. I think speaks a lot. Who mocks, right? And if this person scoffs, speaks a lot, and you would see this word in Psalms chapter 1, right? You should not sit in the seat of the scornful. That's the same word. So he who corrects somebody who yet says that he would get shame for himself. He would be dishonored. Why? Because somebody who is a scorner, who's a mocker, really doesn't care for your admonishing. The second part here is he who rebukes. The rebukes is a synonym, and this rebuke means to show the right way, right? To correct. The wicked. Now the word wicked here, the one who walks away, only harms himself. The word harms himself literally blemish himself. The word blemish means to have a spot. To have a spot. Meaning you would just let people think that you are a bad guy. Right? And so the whole idea of verse 7 in two statements is to refrain from people who cannot take correction. Because if you do, they would come back against you and will make you look like a fool, right? And then you look stupid. Verse 8, do not correct a scoffer. And the word lest here is an English word which we seldom use. It means beware. He will hate you. The word hate means to turn away. But if you rebuke a wise person, he will love you. And so now you have an A and an A prime. So it is a contrast. What is a contrast? A contrast is when you have two statements, one opposite the other, also for the sake of emphasis. It tells you don't discipline somebody who mocks, because he will turn away from you. He won't like you. But if you go and reprove, this word reprove is to correct. If you correct somebody who is wise, right? Man who is wise, and he will love you. And this word is ahav, means he will embrace you, he will give you what he possessed. And so understand this, the wisdom is to do the right thing and chase after the wise, those who will appreciate correction. Wouldn't this be wise words? If people who hate you for it, don't touch. People who love you for it, go for it. So give instructions to the wise. Now understand the word instructions, it doesn't exist, right? It's just in italics. It is applied by the translator. So give to the wise, and he will be wiser for a long time. And then the second one is this word is a bit different in the translation. I think it might be easier to translate this way. Verse 9 may be better translated this way. It says that teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. And this will give us a picture. The wise man, the wise, is contrasted to the just, right? And this word instruction is matched with this verb here, right? So if you give teachings to a wise man, he will be wiser for a long time. If you teach, and this word teach is to how should it is actually it gives us a picture of how do you teach. You a sense of telling them exactly what to do, right? To provide insight to a just man, in this case, a righteous man, and then he will increase in his learning, his knowledge, all right? His knowledge. And hence, this will be an A and a B, which is actually talking about the same thing. These are people who appreciate you teaching them, giving them insight, correcting them, disciplining them, helping them become right again. And that would be where wisdom comes in. Now we come to verse 10, and as a conclusion of this section, it says this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Now, this one is a bit challenging to translate as well. So let's do verse by section by section. First of all, it says here, fear of the Lord. Remember, it is the fear that belongs to the Lord. Now, what does that mean? Now, I'll repeat myself again. The fear of the Lord is the fear that belongs to the Lord. You can fear many things in life, but the Bible tells us that this is the fear that is rightly possessed by God. So that when we are afraid of God, that would be the correct attitude towards God. That would be the fear of God judging us, so that we would need to exude that attitude towards God. So in Proverbs chapter 1, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. In Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, in this case, the word beginning means the opening. Is not chief, right? It is the opening. It is the start of wisdom. And this is important because wisdom, knowledge, understanding are all of the same category. They are synonyms, right? The second phrase here is a bit challenging. So the knowledge of, in this case, it doesn't mean the Holy One. It really means the holy ones, right? The holy things is understanding. And I guess you can say that, no, these are things that belong to God. So the knowledge, not just of God, but the knowledge of the things of God is understanding. And the word understanding here is discernment. And so we have all these. If you fear God, then we can begin to understand what it means to have wisdom. And so let me just summarize this phrase with this comment. There is wisdom of the world. There is lots of knowledge and intelligence of the world. And the Bible is not talking about science and math and economics and so on and so forth. The Bible is really talking about matters of life and matters of living. What does it take to be alive before God? And how to live right before God. And so that we have life, we have joy, we have happiness, we have blessings, and so on and so forth. And that we live a life that we fear God with the fear of the Lord. And thereby wisdom comes where we can help other people. And we know who to correct and who that we will avoid. So you can see, this is not about passing your math exam and getting a PhD in some form of science or genetics. That is intelligence and wisdom of the matters of natural laws. And in this case, wisdom that we are talking about, right? Wisdom, understanding, knowledge. We're talking about the matters of God, His holy things. And verse 11, for by me, who is me? Wisdom. And by wisdom, it includes knowledge and understanding. Your days will be multiplied. Years of life will be added to you. And hence, this seems to tell us that we will continue to be alive. And it means that there is purpose in life. There is no reason for God to shorten your life. You see, the Bible always speaks of life in its natural form. Now we are affected by the environment, our parents, but it's our choice how we live. And so if we want to live right before God, we have to go into the house of wisdom, embrace wisdom, leave behind all naivety, and so on and so forth. And hence, the life will keep going and God will have no reason to shorten your life. So why would God shorten life? Throughout the Bible, we have always seen God cutting down the life of man because of sin, because of rebellion, because they went against God. They did not live the full life, so to speak. And so when the Bible talks about these kinds of phrases, right? Your days will be multiplied, your years will be added to you. It means that you will continue to live longer than you thought you can ever live. And the reason is because God did not punish you to take your life. Like the sons of Aaron, like the 3,000 at the foothills of Mount Sinai, when they served the golden calf, and thereby their lives were shortened. That Korah and his merry men who wanted to be priests and asking why must it be Aaron? Well, God showed them why they should not live, and hence their lives were not multiplied. Their years of life were not added. They were discontinued. Right? Moving on in verse 12. If you are wise, if you be wise, right? If you be wise, be hokmah, then you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, if you mock, you will bear it alone. Now, these are really wise words, I must say. The word scoff here means to look, to make mouths, to mock, and you will bear it alone because the consequences of life is on you alone. Basically, to tell us what we do with life affects us. If we want wisdom, then wisdom will help us in our lives. But if we choose to mock at God's word, we will bear the consequences also by ourselves. Now, Ezekiel chapter 18, right? Ezekiel chapter 18 tells us that the soul that sins, it shall die. Basically, the one who lives and makes those choices rightly or wrongly bears the consequence by him or herself. Now, in our last segment, we look at the foolish woman. So now we have always a contrast, right? The wise woman has a feast laid out, calling out to everybody openly, just come, have life, enjoy the life that wisdom is preparing for you. But in verse 13, we're talking about the contrast. And this would be the word kasilut. Kasilut would be the how should you say, the foolish, the one who ignores, I guess, ignores God. So the woman who ignores God is clamorous. Well, clamorous is an English word that means makes a lot of noise. I guess in our Malay word, it's tin kosong, right? Makes a lot of noise, says a lot of things. And then it says that she is simple. The word here is naive. And then it says and she knows nothing. So, lack of knowledge. Now, let me just take a moment to say this. We're not saying that the woman is stupid, that there is no intelligence in life out there. We're not saying that there is no understanding of life out there. So every time we see the word wisdom, understanding, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, this is the wise. And if you lack, then you are called naive, right? Foolish. So foolish is not a derogatory term. Now, today, of course, you tell somebody, oh, you are a fool. And when we say that that's a very derogatory remark. You're saying something bad about a person because it's got a negative connotation. In the Bible, this word foolish, it doesn't carry that kind of a word. The foolish woman is a naive woman. She knows nothing, means that this foolish woman who ignores God does not have the wisdom of God, does not have the understanding of God, does not have the knowledge of God. That's all. And everything she says is just a whole lot of noise. Now, in modern day terms, we say she's very hot air. And look at what she does. She, the foolish woman, sits at the door of her house on a seat by the highest places of the city to call to those who pass by, who go straight on their way, which means that she is the one who is trying to attract. Right? And she calls out, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. As for him who lacks understanding, she says to him. Now, if you notice, these are all in contrast to the above verses. Now, verse 16 is a contrast to verse 4, where the wise woman, right, is calling out to the simple, whoever is simple, come in here, come into the house. Now, in verse 16, the foolish woman is also doing the same. Turn in here. Come into where? Her house. So there are two houses. You've got to choose. If you are in the simple mind and the foolish woman is equally simple, no knowledge of God, if you lack understanding and discernment, welcome. Stolen water is sweet. Bread eaten in secret is pleasant. These are all words of the harlot, isn't it? Words of the harlot. Stolen water is sweet. Bread eaten in secret is pleasant. And all this is saying that don't worry, right? Whatever you may do with other people, you can get to enjoy. So you notice the enjoyment of the foolish woman, right, has a consequence. And the consequence is this: he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of hell. Now, let me just refer you to the word hell. It is Sheol. Right? There's no word hell. And so this is what the consequence. Is the consequence important? Obviously, this is in contrast to verse 6, right? To verse 6. What is the contrast? So you take a look at this. He does not know that the dead are there, which means that he will soon join them. That's what it means, right? Now, the word dead are what we call, how should you say? This is the one who die from illness, right? That the dead, and these are people who, well, I would say, if you want to say, yeah, these are the ones whose spirit has gone away, right? They have died, right? So the word dead is a good translation, right? He doesn't know because he thinks that this is all very sweet, very pleasant, of all these secret things of the harlot, but he doesn't know that it is a house of the dead, that he will soon be like them, and that her guests, what do you mean her guests? The word here literally means the ones who are called, right? Ones who are called. Who are called? Right here, to call. Everyone who is called. So this is the one who is called. They are in the depth. The depth literally means very deep. In the very depths of Sheol. Basically, this is talking about the same thing, right? The dead and Sheol. The consequence is death. In verse 6, the consequence is life. This is very much a contrast of Psalms chapter 1. So if you have a chance, go back and study Psalms chapter 1. Blessed is the man, or happy is the man, and God knows his way, and his way is life. But the one who leaves the path of righteousness, he will be lost, he will perish, he will go away, and he will die. And so this whole chapter is also split into two. The wise woman, the foolish woman. Basically, two contrasting. If you are with God, you have life. If you're not with God, you don't have life. So do not make the mistake that it is all about the knowledge of the world. That's nothing to do with this passage here. Or people who doesn't know God are stupid people. That's also not being said here. The foolish woman is just basically people who ignores God. And the foolish woman is a clanging cymbal, right? She is naive, knows nothing about life. And so the enticement and the seduction is about a harlot, because it's about an enjoyment that can only be done in secret, which is already wrong, right? So these are all wrong moves. And these wrong moves will bring this person to become part of the guests, part of the ones who go into this house. And when you get into this house, the consequence is game over. And so the admonishment of Solomon is to love wisdom, fear God. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 9.